The lawyer slid the contract across the mahogany desk, and Alara Quinn's hands trembled as she reached for the pen. One signature. That's all it would take to save her dying brother. One signature to chain herself to a man she'd never met. Adrian Voss sat across from her, cold as winter stone, his eyes holding nothing but calculated indifference. "Sign it," he said, his voice cutting through her last shred of hope. "Or walk away and let your family fall apart." She signed. And in that moment, she became a transaction, property, in a world where love was never part of the deal. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and comment which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this journey reaches across the world. Now, let's dive into Alara's story. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Alara sat in the plastic chair beside her brother's bed, watching the shallow rise and fall of his chest, listening to the steady beep of monitors that were the only proof he was still alive. 13 years old. That's all Liam was. 13 years old and dying because they couldn't afford the treatment that might save him. "Miss Quinn?" She looked up. The doctor stood in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral, the face of someone who'd delivered bad news so many times it no longer registered as tragedy. "The experimental treatment," she said before he could speak. "Is there any way, any possibility?" $300,000. He said it like it was nothing, like it wasn't more money than her family would see in 10 lifetimes. "I'm sorry. Without it, we're looking at palliative care, making him comfortable." Comfortable. Such a gentle word for giving up. After he left, Alara sat there until the shadows grew long across the linoleum floor. Her phone buzzed. Another creditor. She didn't answer. What was the point? The medical bills had already destroyed them. Her father's small business had collapsed under the weight of debt. Her mother worked 3 jobs and still they were drowning. And now this, the final impossible ask. She pressed her forehead to Liam's hand, the one without the IV. His skin was too warm, fever bright. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered. "I promise." She had no idea how, but she'd made the promise anyway. The way you do when someone you love is slipping away and words are all you have left. The answer came from the last place she expected. Her father's former business partner, Marcus Chen, showed up at their cramped apartment 2 days later. Alara answered the door in her waitress uniform, about to leave for her evening shift. She barely recognized him. It had been years since the partnership dissolved, years since her father's company went under while Marcus's thrived. "I heard about Liam," he said without preamble. "May I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table, the one with the wobbly leg her father kept meaning to fix. Marcus looked out of place in his expensive suit, surrounded by their poverty. "I have a proposition," he said, "a solution to your family's financial situation." Alara's stomach tightened. Nothing good ever started with those words. "I'm listening." "There's someone, a client of mine, Adrian Voss. He needs a wife." She almost laughed. "I'm sorry, what?" "For appearances. His family's company is merging with a conservative firm in Asia. They won't work with unmarried men. They consider it unstable. Adrian needs to be married within the month or the deal falls through. And he can't find someone on his own? The whole thing sounded absurd. He doesn't want to." Marcus folded his hands on the table. "Adrian isn't interested in romance or companionship. He wants a business arrangement, a contract. Someone who understands this is purely transactional." "Why me?" "Because you need money, and you won't develop inconvenient feelings. You're not the type to mistake a contract for a fairy tale." He said it matter-of-factly, not cruel, but not kind either, just honest. "He's willing to pay off all your family's debts. Your brother's treatment, fully funded. Your father's business bankruptcy, cleared. Your mother's credit cards, medical bills, everything. A clean slate." Alara's throat went dry. "In exchange for what?" "Marriage. 1 year minimum. You'll live in his home, appear at required social events, play the role of dutiful wife in public. In private, you maintain separate lives. At the end of the contract period, you'll divorce quietly. He'll provide a settlement of an additional $200,000. It sounded insane. Completely insane. "I need to think about it," she said. "You have 24 hours. After that, He'll find someone else. Marcus stood, straightening his jacket. I'm sorry it's come to this, Alara, but sometimes we do what we must for the people we love. After he left, she sat at that wobbly table for a long time. She met Adrian Voss in the law office of Whitmore and Associates, 48th floor, all glass and steel and money. The receptionist had looked at her twice, once when she walked in wearing her only good dress, second-hand and slightly too big, and once when she gave her name and the receptionist's expression shifted to something like pity. The conference room was enormous. Alara sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. When Adrian walked in, she understood immediately why he'd needed to resort to a contract. He was handsome in that razor-sharp way that made people uncomfortable, all hard angles and controlled power, like violence wrapped in an expensive suit. Tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of winter storms. But it wasn't his looks that would drive people away. It was the coldness that emanated from him like a force field, the absolute absence of warmth or welcome in his expression. He sat down across from her without offering his hand. Miss Quinn. Mr. Voss. Marcus explained the terms? Yes? And you understand this is strictly business? Yes. He studied her for a moment and she forced herself not to look away, even though everything in her wanted to. His gaze was dissecting, analytical, like he was calculating her worth down to the decimal point. You're very quiet, he said. You're very intimidating. Something flickered in his expression, surprise, maybe, that she'd said it out loud, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I don't need conversation, he said. I need compliance. You'll live in my home. You'll accompany me to business events. You'll be polite, presentable, and unobtrusive. In return, your family's financial problems disappear. And in private? In private, we are strangers who share an address. I have my life. You have yours. We don't interfere with each other. Alara looked at the contract sitting on the table between them. Her brother's face flashed through her mind. Liam, laughing before he got sick. Liam, teaching her to skip stones at the lake. Liam, unconscious in a hospital bed, dying by inches because the world put a price tag on his life and they couldn't afford to pay it. 1 year, she said. Minimum. The contract includes a clause allowing either party to extend if necessary for business purposes. And the divorce is guaranteed. After the minimum period is fulfilled and all contractual obligations are met, yes. She picked up the pen. It was heavy, real gold, probably. Everything in this room cost more than she'd ever owned. There's one thing I need to add, she said. His jaw tightened. This isn't a negotiation. My brother's treatment needs to start immediately, before the wedding. I need your word. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took out his phone, typed something, and showed her the screen. An email to his accountant, instructing an immediate transfer of funds to Mercy General Hospital for Liam Quinn's experimental treatment protocol. Done, Adrian said. Now sign. She signed. Her hand didn't shake. She wouldn't let it. Adrian signed below her name, his signature a harsh slash of black ink. Then the lawyer notarized it, and it was done. Legal, binding. She'd just sold herself to save her brother's life. The wedding is in 1 week, Adrian said, standing. My assistant will contact you with details. Pack light. Most of what you own won't be appropriate for where you're going. It should have been an insult. It was just a fact. He left without another word, and Alara sat there in that enormous conference room, staring at her signature on the contract, wondering what she'd just done. The wedding was exactly what she'd expected. Cold, efficient, empty. City Hall. No guests except Marcus and the lawyer as witnesses. Alara wore a simple cream-colored dress she'd bought on sale. Adrian wore a suit that probably cost more than a car. The officiant rushed through the ceremony like he had somewhere else to be, and when he said, "You may kiss the bride," Adrian's lips touched hers for exactly 1 second. A transaction, not a kiss. She was Mrs. Voss now. The thought made her feel like she was wearing someone else's skin. Adrian's penthouse was in the Platinum Tower downtown. The kind of building with a doorman who looked at you like he was calculating whether you belonged there. The private elevator required a key card. Everything was security and silence and money that didn't need to announce itself because it was simply understood. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, Alara stepped into what felt like a museum. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Everything was white and black and chrome, beautiful in that sterile, untouchable way. No photographs, no personal items, no mess or warmth, or any evidence that a human being actually lived here. "Your room is down the hall," Adrian said, not looking at her. "Second door on the right. Stay out of my study. My bedroom is off limits. The kitchen is fully stocked, though I'm rarely here for meals. Mrs. Chen comes Tuesdays and Fridays to clean. Don't interfere with her work." He rattled off rules like she was an employee, which she supposed she was. "Is there anything else?" she asked quietly. "Don't expect me to entertain you. I work long hours. When I'm home, I value silence and privacy." "I understand." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something crossed his face that she couldn't read. "This doesn't have to be unpleasant," he said, and it almost sounded like he meant it. "As long as we both remember what this is." "A business arrangement." "Exactly." He disappeared into his study, and Alara was left standing in the cavernous living room, her small suitcase at her feet, wondering how she was supposed to live in a place that felt less like a home and more like a very expensive prison. Her room was beautiful. That was the worst part. It had clearly been designed by a professional, all soft grays and whites, with a bed so large she could have slept sideways, an ensuite bathroom with marble counters and a rainfall shower, a walk-in closet that was currently empty except for her meager belongings that looked pathetic hanging in all that space. She sat on the edge of the bed and called her mother. "Alara, how is everything?" "It's fine, Mom." "How's Liam?" "They started the treatment this morning." Her mother's voice broke. "I don't know how you did it, baby, but thank you. Thank you." Alara closed her eyes. "I'm just glad he's getting help." "This man you married, Marcus said he's very wealthy." "Yes." "And he's treating you well?" "Liar, liar." "Yes, Mom, I'm fine." They talked for a few more minutes, her mother's relief palpable even through the phone. When Alara hung up, she sat in the silence of her beautiful prison and tried not to feel like she'd made a terrible mistake. The first week, Adrian was barely there. He left before she woke up and came home after she'd gone to bed. Sometimes she heard him moving around late at night, footsteps in the hallway, the sound of a door closing. Once she woke at 3 in the morning and saw light under his study door. She learned the rhythms of the penthouse, the way sunlight hit the windows in the morning, the hum of the refrigerator, the silence that was so complete it felt like a presence of its own. She also learned things about Adrian, though he never told her directly. He drank his coffee black. He had it delivered every morning at 6:30, always the same order from the same cafe. He read 3 newspapers, physical papers, not digital. He owned exactly 1 photograph, tucked in a drawer of the entryway table where she found it while looking for stamps. A woman with dark hair and a bright smile, her arm around a younger version of Adrian who actually looked happy. She didn't ask about it. It wasn't her business. On Friday night, he came home at a reasonable hour for the first time. Alara was in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner, something she'd done to feel useful, to fill the crushing silence. "What are you doing?" he asked from the doorway. She jumped, nearly dropping the wooden spoon. "Making dinner. I didn't know if you'd eaten. I eat at the office." "Oh." She turned back to the stove, embarrassed. "I'll just make enough for myself then." Silence. She could feel him watching her. "What are you making?" His tone was different, not warm, but not cold either, just curious. "Pasta primavera, it's nothing fancy." More silence. Then, "I haven't eaten yet." It wasn't quite an acceptance, but it wasn't a rejection either. She made 2 plates. They sat at the dining table, which probably seated 12 but felt enormous with just the 2 of them at opposite ends. Adrian ate mechanically, like food was just fuel, nothing to enjoy. "It's good," he said after a while. "Thank you." "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mother, she's Italian. Well, her grandparents were. She taught me some recipes." He nodded, but didn't say anything else. The silence stretched. Alara searched for something to say, anything to fill the space between them. "Your apartment is beautiful," she tried. "It's a penthouse." "Right, the penthouse. It's very clean." "I value organization." This was excruciating. Every attempt at conversation hit a wall. She gave up and focused on her pasta. But then Adrian said something that surprised her. "You don't have to try so hard." She looked up. He was watching her with those storm gray eyes, his expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" "The small talk, the nervous chatter. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid." He set down his fork. "I don't need you to like me, Miss Quinn. I need you to fulfill your contractual obligations and otherwise stay out of my way." The words stung, even though they shouldn't have. She'd known what this was. "Of course," she said quietly. "I apologize." "And stop apologizing. You haven't done anything wrong." "Sorry." She caught herself. Okay. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face, but it was gone before she could be sure. They finished dinner in silence. Well, the first public event was a charity gala 2 weeks after the wedding. Adrian's assistant, a severe woman named Patricia, had arrived at the penthouse 3 days prior with a stylist and enough designer clothes to fill Ilara's empty closet twice over. "Mr. Voss has specific expectations for these events," Patricia explained while the stylist held up various gowns. "You'll need to appear polished, elegant, and completely devoted to your husband." "Devoted?" Ilara repeated. "Affectionate, attentive. The world needs to believe this marriage is real." Patricia's expression made it clear she knew exactly what this marriage was. "Can you manage that?" Ilara thought about her brother, about the treatment that was working, about the debt that was gone. "Yes." "Good. Try this one." The dress was deep emerald green, silk that moved like water. When Ilara put it on, she barely recognized herself in the mirror. The stylist did her hair and makeup, transforming her from invisible to elegant. "You'll do," Patricia said, which apparently passed for a compliment. On the night of the gala, Adrian knocked on her bedroom door. When she opened it, he went very still. "Is something wrong?" she asked. "No." He cleared his throat. "You look appropriate." Appropriate. That was one word for it. He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the tension in his muscles beneath the expensive fabric of his tuxedo. "Remember," he said as they rode down in the elevator, "we're happily married. Whatever you feel about me privately, in public you adore me." "I understand. And if anyone asks personal questions, keep the answers vague. We met through mutual friends. It was love at first sight. All the usual romantic nonsense people expect to hear." Love at first sight. Right. The gala was at the Grandfield Hotel, all marble and crystal chandeliers and people who wore their wealth like armor. Ilara felt out of place immediately, even in her expensive dress. These people had been born into this world. She was just visiting. Adrian's hand settled on the small of her back as they entered, a touch that looked possessive but felt impersonal. "Adrian." A man in his 50s approached, drink in hand. "This must be the lucky lady we've heard so much about." "Richard, this is my wife Ilara. Darling, Richard Patterson, CEO of Patterson Industries." Darling. The endearment sounded foreign in his mouth. "Lovely to meet you," Ilara said, offering her hand. "The pleasure is mine. Adrian's been quite secretive about you. How did you two meet?" She felt Adrian's fingers press slightly into her back, a reminder. "Through mutual friends," she said, smiling. "It all happened rather quickly." "Love often does," Richard said, winking. "You've tamed our infamous bachelor. Well done." Tamed, she resisted the urge to laugh at the absurdity. They moved through the crowd, Adrian introducing her to business associates, investors, people whose names she'd forget immediately. Everyone seemed charmed by the story of their whirlwind romance. No one suspected the truth. She was good at this, she realized. Good at smiling and nodding and playing the part of the devoted wife. Maybe because she'd spent her whole life making herself invisible. And this was just another form of disappearing, becoming whoever people expected her to be. "You're doing well," Adrian murmured during a brief moment when they were alone at their table. "Thank you." "I mean it. You're a better actress than I expected." She didn't know if that was a compliment or an insult. Later, when the orchestra started playing, Adrian stood and offered his hand. "We should dance. People will expect it." Her heart hammered. "I'm not very good at dancing. Just follow my lead." On the dance floor, he pulled her close, closer than they'd ever been. His hand on her waist, her hand in his. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy. This close, she could see that his eyes weren't just gray. They had flecks of blue, like storm clouds with breaks of sky. "Relax," he said. "You're stiff." "I'm nervous." "Why?" "Because everyone's watching us." "Let them watch. They see what we want them to see." But as they moved across the floor, something shifted. His hand tightened slightly on her waist. His gaze dropped to her face and stayed there. For just a moment, just one brief, impossible moment, it felt real. Then the song ended, and he stepped back immediately, the distance returning like a wall slamming down. "I need to speak with some investors," he said. "Mingle. I'll find you when it's time to leave." He disappeared into the crowd, and Alara was alone again. She made her way to the balcony, needing air, needing space from the performance. The city sprawled below, all lights and movement and life happening somewhere else. "Escaped already?" She turned. A woman stood in the doorway holding a champagne glass, her smile knowing. She was beautiful in that effortless way. Blonde, perfectly dressed, completely comfortable in this world. "Just needed some air," Alara said. "I'm Vivian." She stepped onto the balcony. "Old friend of Adrian's." Something in the way she said "old friend" made Alara's stomach tighten. "Alara, but I suppose you already knew that." "Everyone knows that. Adrian Voss finally married. Quite the shock." Vivian studied her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more polished. No offense." "None taken." "How long have you known him?" The question felt loaded. "A few months." "Interesting. He certainly kept you hidden." Vivian sipped her champagne. "But then, Adrian's always been good at keeping secrets." Alara didn't know what to say to that. "Word of advice," Vivian continued, her voice dropping. "Don't fall in love with him. He's not capable of it. Trust me, I learned that the hard way." Before Alara could respond, Adrian appeared in the doorway. "Vivian," his voice was ice. "Adrian, I was just meeting your lovely wife." "And now you have, if you'll excuse us." He took Alara's arm and steered her back inside, his grip firm. "Who was that?" she asked. No one important, but the tension in his jaw said otherwise. They left shortly after, the car ride home silent. When they reached the penthouse, Adrian went straight to his study and closed the door. Alara changed out of her dress and lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Don't fall in love with him. As if there was any danger of that. As if you could love someone who looked at you like you were a problem to be managed, a box to be checked. But she thought about the moment on the dance floor, the way his hand had tightened on her waist, the way his eyes had softened for just a second. Then she pushed the thought away. This was a contract, nothing more. She just needed to remember that. Chichet. 3 weeks into the marriage, Alara found a routine. She woke early, before Adrian left for work. She'd make coffee and sit by the windows, watching the city wake up. Sometimes he'd pass through the kitchen, and they'd exchange brief, stilted good mornings. Sometimes he'd leave without acknowledging her at all. She spent her days reading, exploring the neighborhood, video calling with Liam, who was improving steadily. The treatment was working. Her brother was going to live. That made everything else bearable. In the evenings, she'd cook dinner. Sometimes Adrian would eat with her. Sometimes he wouldn't. The conversations, when they happened, were minimal. How was your day? Fine. Would you like more wine? No. It was lonely in a way she hadn't expected. Being alone was one thing. Being lonely while living with another person was something else entirely. But on Thursday of the 3rd week, something changed. She was in the kitchen making dinner when she heard a crash from Adrian's study, followed by cursing. She hesitated, then knocked on the door. What? His voice was sharp. Are you all right? I'm fine. She should have walked away. Instead, she opened the door. Adrian stood amid shattered glass, his hand bleeding. A tumbler had broken on the floor, whiskey soaking into the expensive rug. I said I'm fine, he snapped. You're bleeding. It's nothing. Alara ignored him, went to the kitchen, and came back with the first aid kit. She knelt beside him, picking up the larger pieces of glass. Leave it, he said. Sit down. Excuse me? She looked up at him. Sit down. Let me see your hand. For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then, to her surprise, he sat. His hand was cut across the palm, not deep but bleeding steadily. She cleaned it carefully, her fingers gentle against his skin. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "I was careless." "Were you drinking?" "Does it matter?" She wrapped gauze around his palm. "You could have hurt yourself worse." "Concerned for me, Miss Quinn?" "It's Mrs. Voss now," she said without thinking. "And yes, actually, believe it or not." He went very still. When she glanced up, he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Why?" he asked. "Why what?" "Why do you care? This is a contract. I pay you to appear at events and stay out of my way. Nothing in our agreement requires you to give a damn if I bleed." His words were harsh, but there was something underneath them, something that sounded almost like pain. "Maybe I'm just a decent person," she said quietly. "Did you consider that?" "Decent people don't sell themselves into marriage." It was cruel, intentionally so. She should have flinched, should have backed away. Instead, she finished tying off the bandage and met his eyes. "No," she agreed. "Decent people sacrifice themselves to save the people they love. There's a difference." She stood, gathering the first aid supplies. "Alara." She stopped. He'd never used her first name before. "Thank you," he said. Quiet, almost reluctant. "You're welcome." She left him sitting there, surrounded by broken glass, and went back to the kitchen where dinner was burning. After that night, something shifted. Adrian started coming home earlier, not every night, but more often. He'd eat dinner with her, and the silences became less oppressive. He asked about her day. She asked about his work. The conversations were still surface level, still careful, but they were conversations. One evening, she found him in the living room, standing by the windows, lost in thought. "Penny for your thoughts?" she said. He glanced at her. "That's a terrible exchange rate." "Inflation." The corner of his mouth twitched. Was that almost a smile? "The merger's going through," he said. "The one I needed the marriage for." "That's good, isn't it?" "Yes." But he didn't sound happy about it. "Then why do you look like you're going to a funeral?" He was quiet for a long moment, then, "Because it means I've accomplished what I set out to do. And I'm not sure what comes next." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to her. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," Ilara offered. "Not knowing what comes next? Maybe it means you get to decide instead of just following the plan." He looked at her, really looked at her, and she felt something stir in her chest, something dangerous and entirely unwelcome. "You're an optimist," he said. "Someone has to be." "Why?" "The world doesn't reward optimism." "Maybe not, but cynicism is exhausting." He laughed, actually laughed. It was brief, barely there, but real. "Fair point." They stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, and for the first time since she'd signed that contract, Alara didn't feel quite so alone. So, the package arrived on a Tuesday. Alara was home alone when the doorman called up. "Delivery for Mrs. Voss." She wasn't expecting anything. When she opened the door, the delivery man handed her a long white box tied with ribbon. Inside were white roses, a dozen of them, perfect and pristine. No card. She set them on the kitchen counter, confused. Wrong address, maybe? She texted Adrian to ask if he was expecting flowers. His response came quickly. "They're for you." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. Why? 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then, "You cleaned my study after I broke the glass. I never thanked you properly." She stared at the message, at the flowers, at this strange gesture from a man who'd made it clear he wanted nothing from her but distance. "You didn't have to do that," she typed. "I know." She touched one of the roses, soft petals against her fingertips, and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. This was a contract, nothing more. But the flowers said otherwise. That night, Adrian came home carrying takeout from an expensive Italian restaurant. "I thought we could eat together," he said, almost awkward. "If you haven't made plans." "I haven't." They sat at the dining table, still at opposite ends, but it felt less distant than before. "Thank you for the flowers," she said. "You're welcome." White roses are my favorite. I know. She blinked. How did you know that? You mentioned it. At the gala, when we were talking to the mayor's wife, she asked about your wedding bouquet, and you said you would have chosen white roses if it had been a real wedding. He'd remembered. He'd been paying attention. I didn't think you heard that, she said quietly. I hear most things. They ate in silence for a while. Then Alara said, Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. The woman in the photograph, in the entryway table drawer, who is she? Adrian's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Someone I used to know, he finally said. Someone important? Once. His jaw tightened. A long time ago. What happened? She died. The words were flat, emotionless, but Alara heard everything underneath them. The grief, the anger, the guilt. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. It was years ago. But years didn't matter when it came to loss. Alara knew that. Some wounds never fully healed. Is that why? She started, then stopped. Why what? Why you wanted a contract marriage instead of a real one? He set down his fork. Among other reasons. You don't think you'll ever want something real? I think real is overrated. People confuse chemistry for compatibility, passion for commitment. They build their lives on feelings that fade, and then they're surprised when everything falls apart. That's incredibly cynical. It's realistic. It's sad. His eyes flashed. You think I'm sad? I think you're lonely. There's a difference. I'm not lonely. I'm selective. You're isolated, she corrected gently. There's a difference there, too. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he stood abruptly. I have work to do. He left his half-finished dinner and disappeared into his study. Alara sat alone at the table, wondering if she'd pushed too far, crossed a line she wasn't supposed to cross. But later that night, when she passed his study door, she heard something that made her stop. Music. Soft and melancholic, drifting through the gap beneath the door. She stood there listening, and she understood something about Adrian Voss that she hadn't before. He wasn't made of ice. He'd just learned to freeze everything before it could hurt him. And somehow, without meaning to, she'd started to thaw. The music became a pattern. Every night around 11, after he thought she'd gone to bed, Alara would hear it drifting from his study. Always classical. Always melancholic. She started recognizing pieces. Chopin, Debussy, Rachmaninoff. Music that felt like longing translated into sound. She never mentioned it. Some things weren't meant to be acknowledged, but she started leaving her door open just a crack, listening in the dark, wondering what memories those songs conjured for him, wondering about the woman in the photograph, about the life Adrian had lived before he'd built these walls around himself. By the end of their second month living together, they'd developed an unspoken rhythm. Adrian would come home around 7. They'd eat dinner together more often than not. The conversations remained surface level, but they were easier now, less forced. He asked about her brother one evening, surprising her. How's Liam doing? Better. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. She set down her wine glass. He's responding to the treatment better than they expected. That's good. It's because of you. The treatment, I mean. None of this would be possible without... Don't! His voice was sharp. Don't make me into something I'm not. I wasn't trying to... I'm not a hero, Alara. I made a business transaction. You needed money, I needed a wife. That's all this is. The words stung more than they should have. She'd been thinking the same thing for weeks, but hearing him say it so bluntly felt like a slap. Of course, she said quietly. I apologize for overstepping. He looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he stood abruptly. I have calls to make. After he left, Alara sat alone at the table, the half-eaten meal between them, feeling like evidence of something that wasn't quite working. She was starting to see cracks in his armor, starting to understand that beneath all that ice was someone hurting. But every time she got close, he'd retreat. She couldn't figure out if he was protecting himself or protecting her. Maybe both. That night, there was no music from his study. Just silence, heavy and complete. The next morning, she found another bouquet of white roses on the kitchen counter. No note, no explanation. Just flowers, like an apology he couldn't speak out loud. She pressed her fingers to one of the petals and tried not to feel anything at all. The second gala came 3 weeks later. This one was bigger, a fundraiser for children's hospitals, black tie, 500 guests. Patricia had delivered another designer gown. This one, midnight blue with a plunging back. Mr. Voss specifically requested this one, Patricia said, which surprised Alara. She didn't think Adrian noticed what she wore, but when she emerged from her room that evening, he stopped mid-step in the hallway. His eyes traveled over her slowly, something unguarded flickering across his face before the mask slammed back into place. "You look presentable," he said. "You already used that word last time." "Then you look acceptable." "Still not a compliment." "Fine. You look beautiful." "Better?" The word sounded almost angry, like he resented having to say it. But he'd said it. In the car, he was tense, his jaw tight, his hands restless. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Why wouldn't I be? You seem on edge." "I'm always on edge before these things." "Why?" He glanced at her. "Because I have to pretend to be someone I'm not for 4 hours. It's exhausting." "You mean you have to pretend to be happy?" "Among other things." She wanted to ask what other things, but they'd arrived at the venue. The moment the car door opened, Adrian's entire demeanor shifted. The tension melted away, replaced by smooth confidence. He helped her out, his hand warm on hers, and smiled at the photographers like he'd been smiling all day. It was remarkable, really. The transformation. Like watching someone put on a costume. Inside, he was charm itself, introducing her to people whose names she'd never remember, his hand never leaving the small of her back, playing the role of devoted husband so convincingly that even she almost believed it. "You two are absolutely radiant," an older woman gushed. "How long have you been married now?" 2 months, Adrian said, pulling Alara closer, though it feels like no time at all. "Young love," the woman sighed. "Treasure it." After she walked away, Alara murmured, "You're a very good liar." "It's not lying, it's acting." "What's the difference?" "Lying is malicious. Acting is survival." Before she could respond, someone called Adrian's name. He excused himself, leaving her alone in a crowd of strangers. She made her way to the bar, ordered a glass of wine, and tried to look like she belonged there. "Mrs. Voss?" She turned. A man stood beside her, mid-40s, expensive suit, familiar in a way that made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't place why. "I don't believe we've met," she said carefully. "Marcus Chen didn't mention me?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm James Voss, Adrian's father." Everything in her went cold. Adrian had never mentioned his father. She'd assumed they weren't close, but the way this man was looking at her suggested something darker than simple estrangement. "It's nice to meet you," she managed. "Is it?" He sipped his drink. "I doubt that. I imagine my son has said nothing flattering about me." "He hasn't said anything at all, actually." "How typical. Adrian's always been talented at pretending inconvenient people don't exist." James studied her like she was a specimen under glass. "You're not what I expected." "So I've been told." "I expected someone more calculating, someone who'd pursued him deliberately. But you seem rather ordinary." The insult was delivered casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "I'm sorry to disappoint," Alara said, her voice tight. "Oh, you don't disappoint me. You disappoint my expectations for my son. I raised him to be strategic, to marry someone who could elevate the Voss name. Instead, he chooses—" He gestured vaguely at her. "Well, you." Something hot flared in her chest. "I think this conversation is over." "Is it?" James moved closer. "Here's something you should know about Adrian, Mrs. Voss. He doesn't love. He doesn't attach. He uses people until they're no longer useful, and then he discards them. Whatever you think is happening between you two, you're wrong. You're a means to an end, and when that end is achieved, you'll be gone." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like you." His smile was cold. "You seem sweet, naive, and I'd hate to see my son destroy you the way he destroys everything he touches." Before she could respond, Adrian appeared at her elbow. "Father," the word was ice. "I didn't realize you were attending tonight." "I'm on the board. Of course I'm attending." James's smile widened. "I was just getting acquainted with your lovely wife. We were having such a nice conversation." "Were you?" It wasn't a question. The tension between them was suffocating. Alara felt caught in the middle of something much larger than a simple family disagreement. "We should go," Adrian said, his hand wrapping around her wrist. "Leaving so soon? The night's just begun. I have an early meeting." "Always working, just like I taught you." James raised his glass in mock salute. "Lovely to meet you, Ilara. I'm sure we'll see each other again." Adrian pulled her away before she could respond, his grip tight enough to hurt. They didn't speak until they were in the car, the city lights blurring past the windows. "What did he say to you?" Adrian's voice was dangerous. "Nothing important. Don't lie to me." She turned to look at him. His jaw was clenched so hard she could see the muscle jumping. His hands were fists. "He said you don't love anyone, that you use people and discard them." She paused. "He said I'm just a means to an end." Adrian said nothing for a long moment. Then, "He's not wrong." The admission hurt more than it should have. "Is that really what you think?" she asked quietly. "It's what I know. It's what he taught me. That's a horrible way to live. It's safe. It's lonely." He turned to her then, his eyes blazing. "You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through, what I've lost. You think you can fix me with your optimism and your white roses and your home-cooked meals, but you can't. I'm not broken, Alara. I'm built this way." "I don't think you're broken," she said. "I think you're scared." "Of what?" "Of feeling something real and losing it again." He laughed, harsh and bitter. "Psychology now? Is that what this is?" "It's observation." "Well, observe this." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Whatever you think you see in me, it's not real. I'm exactly who my father says I am. I use people. I don't care. And when our contract is up, you'll leave and I'll feel nothing. Understand?" She should have flinched, should have looked away. Instead, she held his gaze. "I don't believe you." "Then you're a fool." They didn't speak for the rest of the drive. When they reached the penthouse, Adrian went straight to his study and slammed the door. Alara heard the clink of glass, the pour of liquid. She changed out of her gown and sat on her bed, shaking. She'd pushed too far, crossed a line she shouldn't have crossed. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything he'd said in the car was exactly what he'd needed to say to keep her at a distance. That underneath all that anger was fear, pure and simple. Around midnight, she heard it. Not music this time, a crash, glass breaking, a sound that might have been a curse or might have been something worse. She should have stayed in her room, should have let him destroy himself in private. Instead, she walked to his study and opened the door. Adrian sat on the floor, his back against the desk, surrounded by broken glass and spilled whiskey. His tie was gone, his shirt unbuttoned. He looked up when she entered, his eyes unfocused. "Get out," he said. She closed the door behind her and sat down beside him, careful of the glass. "I said get out." "I heard you." "Why are you still here?" "Because you're hurting." He laughed, the sound ragged. "You don't know what hurting is." "My brother almost died. My family lost everything. I sold myself into marriage to save them. Don't tell me I don't know what hurting is." He turned to look at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, his mask was completely gone. What she saw underneath broke her heart. "Her name was Catherine," he said quietly. "The woman in the photograph." Lara waited, not speaking. "We were engaged. I was 25, stupid, believed in all the things you believe in. Love, partnership, forever." He picked up a piece of broken glass, turning it over in his palm. "She had a heart condition, something congenital. We knew about it, but the doctor said it was manageable. We were planning the wedding when she collapsed one night, just dropped. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was gone. Adrian, my father, came to the hospital, stood there looking at her body and said, 'This is what happens when you let yourself care. You give people power to destroy you.' And I realized he was right. Caring had destroyed me. Loving her had destroyed me. So I decided I'd never do it again." Alara's throat was tight. "That's not living. It's surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" He dropped the glass. "Because from where I'm sitting, living just means giving the world more ammunition to hurt you." She reached for his hand, the one that was still bandaged from when he'd cut it weeks ago. He didn't pull away. I'm sorry you lost her, she said softly. I'm sorry your father made you believe that caring was weakness. But he was wrong, Adrian. Caring isn't what destroyed you. Losing her is what destroyed you. And refusing to care again isn't protecting you. It's just a different kind of dying. You don't understand. Maybe not. But I understand loneliness. And I understand being afraid. And I know that the walls you've built around yourself aren't keeping you safe. They're keeping you trapped. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted, softened. Why do you care? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I've given you nothing but coldness. I've been cruel. I've pushed you away at every turn. Why do you keep trying? Because underneath all of that, I see someone worth caring about. You're wrong. I don't think I am. They sat there in the broken glass and spilled whiskey, and for the first time, Adrian didn't pull away when she leaned her head against his shoulder. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Let someone in. You're doing it right now. He was silent for a long time, then, I'm afraid. Of what? Of this. Of you. Of what it means if I start to care and then lose you too. You won't lose me. You don't know that. No, she admitted. I don't. But being afraid of loss doesn't make the loss any less inevitable. It just means you wasted the time you had being scared instead of living. He turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to find the lie, the trap, the inevitable betrayal. But there wasn't one. I don't deserve you, he said. Probably not. But here I am anyway. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him. Then he did something that surprised them both. He kissed her, not like at their wedding, perfunctory and cold. This was real, desperate, like he was drowning and she was air. Alara's breath caught. For a moment she froze. Then she kissed him back, her hands finding his face, feeling the stubble on his jaw, the heat of his skin. When they broke apart, they were both breathing hard. That was a mistake, Adrian said, but he didn't move away. Was it? This is a contract. We agreed. Forget the contract. We can't. Why not? Because... He stopped, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Because I don't know how to do this without hurting you. Then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her again, slower this time, and she felt something shift between them, like a door opening, like ice cracking. When he pulled her closer, she went willingly, and for the first time since she'd entered this penthouse, she didn't feel like a stranger in someone else's life. She felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They stayed on the floor of his study until the early hours of the morning, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. He told her about Catherine, about the guilt he carried, about the way his father had shaped him into something hard and unfeeling. She told him about her family, about the weight of responsibility, about feeling invisible her entire life. You're not invisible, he said. I see you. Do you? Every day. You think I don't notice, but I do. The way you arrange books by color, the way you hum when you cook, the way you always check the window before bed to make sure it's locked even though we're 48 floors up. She stared at him. You notice all that. I notice everything about you. Something warm bloomed in her chest, dangerous and terrifying and entirely welcome. Adrian? I think I'm starting to care about you. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't respond. Then, I know, that's what scares me most. They fell asleep there, tangled together on the floor, and when Alara woke up hours later with the morning sun streaming through the windows, she found herself alone. Adrian had covered her with his jacket and left a glass of water on the desk, but he was gone. She sat up disoriented and saw a note on his chair. Had to go to the office early. Mrs. Chen will clean the glass. We should talk tonight. She pressed the note to her chest and tried not to hope too hard. That evening, she cooked his favorite meal, at least the one she'd noticed him finishing every time she made it. Chicken marsala with roasted vegetables. She set the table carefully, opened a bottle of wine, and waited. 7 o'clock came and went. 8 o'clock. 9. At 10, she gave up and put the food away. At 11, she heard the front door open. Adrian walked in looking exhausted, his tie loose, his hair disheveled. When he saw the table still set, something crossed his face. "I'm sorry," he said. "I got caught up in... It's fine. It's not fine. I should have called. You're here now." They stood there, the weight of the previous night between them. "About last night," Adrian started. Alara's heart sank. Here it came. The backpedaling, the walls going back up. "It shouldn't have happened," he continued. "I was drunk, emotional, not thinking clearly." "Right. But..." He stepped closer. "I meant everything I said. About seeing you, about noticing, about being afraid." "Then why are you apologizing?" "Because I don't want you to expect things from me that I can't give." "What things?" "Love. A real marriage. Happily ever after." "I'm not asking for any of that." "Aren't you?" She met his eyes. "I'm asking for honesty. I'm asking you to stop pretending you don't feel anything when I know you do. Feeling something and acting on it are different things." "Why?" "Because acting on it means risking everything, and I can't..." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "I can't lose someone else. I won't survive it. So instead you're choosing to lose me slowly. Is that better?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, but it's what we have." She moved closer to him. "You asked me why I care. I'll tell you. Because I see who you are underneath all this fear. I see someone kind and broken and trying so hard not to be hurt again that he's forgotten how to live. And I care because someone should. Because you deserve to be cared about, even if you don't believe it." "Alara, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to stop punishing yourself for loving someone who died. Because she wouldn't want this for you, this half-life, this cold existence." Tears were streaming down her face now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. Adrian looked at her like she'd broken something inside him. Then he crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered into her hair. "We'll figure it out. What if I hurt you? What if you don't?" He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Then he kissed her, gentle this time, like she was something precious that might break. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. "This is terrifying," he said. "I know. I'm probably going to mess this up." "Probably. And you still want to try?" "Yes." He kissed her again, and this time when he pulled her close, it felt less like desperation and more like surrender. That night things changed between them. The walls didn't come down all at once. Adrian was too practiced at protecting himself for that. But they started to crack. He started coming home earlier, started asking about her day and actually listening to the answers, started eating dinner with her every night instead of hiding in his study. The white roses appeared more frequently, sometimes with notes now. Simple things. "Thought of you," or "These reminded me of your smile." She started finding books on the coffee table, novels he'd picked up because she'd mentioned liking the author. Coffee from her favorite cafe waiting for her in the morning. Small gestures that said what he couldn't yet say out loud. They still slept in separate rooms, but the distance between those rooms felt less absolute. One evening, she found him in the living room, standing by the windows like she'd found him that first time. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "You?" The admission was so simple, so honest, that it stole her breath. "What about me?" He turned to face her. "How you've changed everything. This place used to be just somewhere I slept. Now when I think about coming home, I think about you being here. And that's..." He trailed off. "Scary? Terrifying." She walked over to him, slipped her hand into his. "For what it's worth, I'm terrified too." "Why? You're not the one who's forgotten how to feel." "No. But I'm the one falling for someone who might never fall back." His hand tightened on hers. "Alara, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know." They stood there in the city lights, and something passed between them. An understanding, maybe. An acknowledgement that whatever this was becoming, there was no going back. Later that night, she heard the music again. But this time, it wasn't melancholic. It was Vivaldi. Spring. Something hopeful. She fell asleep smiling. The shift in their relationship didn't go unnoticed. Patricia commented on it when she came by with details for an upcoming business dinner. "You two seem different," she said carefully. "Different how?" More natural, less like you're acting. Patricia studied her. Be careful, Mrs. Voss. Of what? Of forgetting this is temporary. Contracts end. Feelings don't, not always. And I've seen what happens when people confuse the two. After she left, Ilara sat with those words. Temporary, right. This was always meant to be temporary, but it was starting to feel permanent. That scared her more than anything. The warning from Patricia stayed with Ilara like a bruise she kept pressing on. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the small victories. Adrian smiling more, the conversations that lasted past dinner, the way he'd started reaching for her hand without thinking about it first. But in quiet moments, usually late at night when she couldn't sleep, the truth would settle over her like cold water. This was temporary. She'd signed a contract that said so in black and white. The problem was, her heart hadn't read the fine print. 3 months into the marriage, Liam was declared in remission. Her mother called sobbing with relief, and Ilara sat on her bedroom floor crying too, overwhelmed by gratitude and guilt in equal measure. Her brother was alive because she'd sold herself. Some days that felt noble. Other days it felt like she'd traded one kind of prison for another. Except this prison had started to feel like home. Adrian found her still sitting there an hour later, her phone clutched in her hand, tears drying on her face. What's wrong? He was beside her immediately, his hand on her shoulder. Is it Liam? He's in remission. Adrian went very still. That's incredible news. I know. Then why are you crying? She looked up at him, this man who'd bought her like a commodity and somehow become the person she thought about first thing every morning. Because I keep forgetting this isn't real, and then something like this happens, and I remember what it cost to get here. Understanding crossed his face. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. No. Yes. I don't know. She wiped her eyes. I regret that it was necessary. I don't regret that Liam's alive. And the rest of it? She knew what he was really asking. Did she regret him? No, she said. I don't regret the rest of it. His hand found hers, fingers interlacing. They sat there in silence, and Ilara tried not to think about how many days they had left before the contract's minimum term was up. Tried not to count down to the moment when he could walk away and she'd have no reason to stay. I need to tell you something, Adrian said after a while. Her stomach dropped. Okay. My father's been calling. He wants to have dinner. All three of us. Why? I don't know. Probably to intimidate you some more. He's good at that. Adrian's jaw tightened. We don't have to go. Will it cause problems if we don't? Probably. She squeezed his hand. Then we'll go. He looked at her like she'd just volunteered to walk into a fire. You don't know what you're agreeing to. So tell me. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. My father is the reason I am the way I am. Cold. Controlling. He raised me to believe that emotions were weaknesses to be eliminated. That love was a liability. When Catherine died, he saw it as proof that he'd been right all along. He sounds like a terrible person. He's brilliant and ruthless and completely devoid of empathy. And for most of my life, I wanted nothing more than to make him proud. Adrian's voice was bitter. Pathetic, right? Human. He glanced at her. You always do that. Do what? Make me feel less broken than I am. You're not broken, Adrian. You're just hurt. Same thing. It's really not. He leaned his head back against the wall, his eyes closed. He's going to try to destroy this. Whatever we're building. He'll see it as weakness, and he'll go after it. Let him try. You say that now. I mean it. She shifted to face him. I'm not afraid of your father. You should be. Well, I'm not. And I'm not going anywhere. He opened his eyes, searching her face. You can't promise that. Why not? Because we have a contract, an end date. When the year is up, the contract has an extension clause, she reminded him. Either party can choose to extend. For business purposes. Does it specifically say it has to be only for business purposes? He blinked. I don't remember. Maybe we should check. Something that looked dangerously close to hope flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual careful control. "We should get ready," he said, standing and offering his hand. "We're meeting him at 8. But his hand stayed in hers longer than necessary, and when he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that made her chest ache. The restaurant James Voss had chosen was the kind of place where they didn't list prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Elara wore a black dress that Patricia had insisted was armor for battle, and she was starting to understand why. James was already seated when they arrived, a scotch in front of him, his expression carved from stone. He stood when they approached, but the gesture felt perfunctory rather than polite. "Adrian. Elara." He nodded at them. "Please, sit." The meal started civil enough. James asked about the business, about the merger that had finalized successfully. Adrian answered in clipped sentences, his hand occasionally finding Elara's under the table, like he was checking to make sure she was still there. It wasn't until dessert arrived that James showed his teeth. "I've been hearing interesting things," he said, swirling his scotch. "Rumors, really, about you two." "What kind of rumors?" Adrian's voice was carefully neutral, that this marriage might not be as strategic as I was led to believe. Elara felt Adrian tense beside her. "I don't know what you're talking about," Adrian said. "Don't you?" James leaned back, his eyes moving between them. "See, I was under the impression this was a business arrangement, a necessary transaction to close the merger. But my sources tell me you've been playing house, coming home early, eating dinner together like a real married couple." He smiled, sharp as a knife. "Getting attached." "Your sources need better hobbies," Elara said before she could stop herself. James's attention swung to her. "Speak when spoken to, dear." "She can speak whenever she wants," Adrian said, his voice hard. "Can she?" "That's new for you, letting someone have a voice." "What do you want, Father?" "I want to make sure you remember what this is. A tool, a means to an end, nothing more." "You've made your position clear." "Have I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're repeating old mistakes." James's eyes were cruel. "Catherine destroyed you. Are you really going to let this girl do the same?" Adrian's hand clenched around his glass so hard Elara thought it might shatter. "Don't," Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. "Don't bring her into this." "Why not? She's relevant. You loved her, she died, and you fell apart. Took you years to rebuild yourself. Now here you are, making the same mistake with—" He gestured dismissively at Elara. "Her! You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" James leaned forward. "You think I haven't noticed the change in you? You're softer, distracted, weak, and all because you've developed feelings for a woman you bought like a piece of furniture." Elara flinched. The words hit exactly where they were meant to. "That's enough," Adrian said, standing abruptly. "We're leaving. Sit down." "No. I said sit down." James's voice cracked like a whip. "We're not finished." "Yes, we are." Adrian threw money on the table. Too much, probably, but he clearly didn't care. "Stay the hell away from us. From her. I mean it." He grabbed Elara's hand and pulled her toward the exit. Behind them, James called out, "She'll destroy you, Adrian, just like the last one did. And when she's gone, don't come crying to me." In the car, Adrian was silent. His jaw was locked, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Elara wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt inadequate. When they got back to the penthouse, he went straight to his study. Elara stood in the hallway, listening to the sound of drawers slamming, papers being thrown, the crash of something breaking. She gave him 10 minutes. Then she opened the door. Adrian stood at the window, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with tension. "I told you he'd try to destroy this," he said without turning around. "He didn't destroy anything." "Didn't he?" "He's right, Elara, about all of it. I bought you. This was never supposed to be real." "But it is real, is it?" He spun to face her. "Or are you just good at pretending, at playing the part you were paid to play?" The accusation stung. "You don't believe that." "Don't I?" "How do I know any of this is real? How do I know you're not just performing? Because I'm standing here right now when I could be anywhere else. Because I stayed when your father tried to tear me down. Because I—" She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Because what? Because I'm falling in love with you, you idiot. The silence was deafening. Adrian stared at her like she'd slapped him. Don't, he said finally. Don't what? Don't love me. Don't waste your time on someone who can't give you what you deserve. What I deserve? Adrian, I signed a contract to marry a stranger for money. I'm not exactly holding out for a fairy tale here. Then what are you holding out for? You. The word came out broken. Just you. Broken and scared and terrible at expressing emotions. That's what I want. He crossed the space between them in 3 strides, his hands framing her face. I'm going to hurt you. Probably. I'm going to disappoint you. Likely. Then why, Because loving someone isn't about them being perfect. It's about choosing them anyway. He kissed her then, desperate and almost angry, like he was trying to prove her wrong, trying to scare her away. She kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Then stop trying to figure it out and just do it. What if I fail? Then you fail, and we try again. Something in him cracked. She could see it happening, the walls he'd spent years building starting to crumble. I'm terrified of losing you, he admitted. I'm terrified of you pushing me away. What if I do both? Then I'll be here anyway, being annoying and making pasta and leaving lights on in rooms I'm not using. A laugh escaped him, surprised and genuine. You do leave every light on. I'm afraid of the dark. I know, I noticed. You notice everything. Only about you. They stood there holding each other, and Alara felt something settle in her chest. This was real. Whatever his father said, whatever the contract specified, this was real. That night, Adrian didn't retreat to his study. Instead, he followed her to her room and sat on the edge of her bed. Can I stay? He asked, and the vulnerability in his voice nearly broke her. Of course. They lay there fully clothed, facing each other in the dark. His hand found hers between them. Tell me about Catherine, she said softly. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. She was everything I wasn't, he finally said. Warm, open. She could walk into a room and make everyone feel seen. I never understood what she saw in me. Maybe she saw what I see. Which is? Someone worth loving. His hand tightened on hers. I proposed to her in the rain. Stupid and impulsive and completely unlike me. She said yes before I even finished asking. We were supposed to get married in the spring. His voice cracked. She died in January. I'm so sorry. I blamed myself for months. If I hadn't pushed her to come to that business dinner, if I'd noticed she wasn't feeling well, It wasn't your fault. Logically, I know that. But logic doesn't help much when you're standing at someone's grave. Alara moved closer, resting her head against his chest. His arm came around her automatically. She'd hate what you've become, she said gently. This closed-off version of yourself. I know. Do you think she'd want you to be happy? Yes. Then maybe you should try. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I'm trying. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and when Alara woke in the middle of the night, she found Adrian watching her. Can't sleep? She murmured. I keep thinking you're going to disappear. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now. I mean it. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. Don't leave me. I won't. Promise. I promise. It was a promise she meant with everything she had. What she didn't know yet was how hard it would be to keep. The weeks that followed were the happiest Alara had been since moving into the penthouse. Adrian was still guarded, still struggled with vulnerability, but he was trying. He came home for dinner every night, started asking her opinion on business decisions. Introduced her to his colleagues as his wife without the careful distance he'd maintained before. They started sleeping in the same bed, though they hadn't crossed certain lines yet. Adrian seemed afraid to, like physical intimacy would somehow break whatever fragile thing they were building. We don't have to rush, Alara told him one night when his kisses had turned heated and then abruptly stopped. I want to. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Catherine and I we were waiting until after the wedding, and then she died. And since then there hasn't been anyone. Understanding dawned. You haven't been with anyone since her? No, it felt like betrayal. Adrian, that was 8 years ago. I know. You know that's not healthy, right? I'm aware. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. There's no timeline here. We move at whatever pace you need. What if I'm never ready? Then we figure it out. He looked at her like she was some kind of miracle. How are you real? I ask myself the same thing about you. He kissed her then, soft and sweet, and whispered against her lips. Thank you. That night, he held her close, and for the first time in years, Adrian Voss slept through the night without nightmares. But peace never lasted long in their world. The threat came from an unexpected direction. Alara was having lunch with her mother when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk about Adrian. Meet me at Café Noir, 2 p.m. Come alone. V. She knew immediately who V was, Vivienne. She should have ignored it, should have told Adrian. But curiosity got the better of her. At 2 o'clock, she walked into Café Noir to find Vivienne sitting in a corner booth, looking elegant and dangerous. I wasn't sure you'd come, Vivienne said. I'm here. What do you want? To warn you. About? Adrian's father contacted me, offered me money to help break up your marriage. Alara's blood went cold. And you're telling me this because I turned him down, but others won't. Vivienne leaned forward. James Voss will do anything to keep Adrian under his control. Anything. And you're a threat to that control. What does he want you to do? Plant seeds of doubt, make you question Adrian's feelings, convince you to leave before the contract's up. She paused. He has a file on you, everything, your family's debts, your brother's illness. He knows exactly how to hurt you. Why are you telling me this? Because I loved Adrian once. Still do in some ways, and I've never seen him as happy as he's been these past few weeks. Whatever you two have, it's real, and James will destroy it if you let him. Alara's mind was racing. What should I do? Hold on, don't let him get in your head, and tell Adrian. He needs to know what his father's planning. After Vivienne left, Alara sat there trying to process everything. James was coming after them, after her specifically, and he was using her family as ammunition. She needed to tell Adrian. But when she got home, she found something that changed everything. A file on the kitchen counter. Thick manila folder with her name on it. Inside were documents, financial records, medical reports about Liam, photos of her family. And at the bottom, a contract amendment. A clause that would extend the marriage indefinitely, with a substantial financial penalty if either party sought divorce. And it was dated 3 weeks ago. Before he'd started being vulnerable. Before he'd said he was trying. Her hands shook as she read it. This wasn't about feelings. This was about control. About keeping her locked in place. She heard the door open behind her. You're home early, Adrian said. Then he saw the file. His face went white. Alara, what is this? It's not what you think. Really? Because it looks like you were planning to trap me in this marriage before you ever pretended to have feelings. I wasn't pretending. Weren't you? This is dated 3 weeks ago, Adrian, before any of... She gestured between them. This happened. I was protecting myself. By making sure I couldn't leave. That's not protection, that's imprisonment. You don't understand? Then explain it to me. Her voice broke. Explain why you do this after everything you said about not being your father, about trying to be better. He looked stricken. I was scared. You were getting close, and I panicked, and I drafted that amendment to make sure I was stuck with you. To make sure you wouldn't leave before I figured out how to ask you to stay. The words hung in the air between them. What? She whispered. I drafted it because I was falling for you, and I didn't know how to tell you. Because every defense mechanism I have was screaming at me to lock you down, to make sure you couldn't walk away. He ran his hands through his hair. I know how it looks. I know it's controlling and manipulative and exactly what my father would do. But I swear to you, I never filed it. I couldn't. Because you were right about all of it. That's not love. That's fear. She looked down at the document again, unsigned. unfiled. Where did this come from? She asked. I don't know. It should be in my safe. Understanding crashed over them both at the same time. Your father, she said. Adrian's face went dark. He has people everywhere, keys to places he shouldn't have access to. He moved toward her. Alara, I swear to you I was never going to use this. I wrote it in a moment of panic, and then I couldn't bring myself to destroy it because part of me was still so terrified you'd leave. You should have told me. I know. I was going to. I just didn't know how. She wanted to believe him. Every part of her wanted to believe him. How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. You don't. He stopped a few feet away from her. You can't. That's what makes trust so terrifying. You have to take a leap of faith. Your father said you use people and discard them. He's right. I did. For years, that's exactly what I did. And now I'm trying to be someone different, someone worthy of you. He took a breath. But I can't prove that with words. I can only prove it with time, with choices, and I understand if you don't want to give me that chance. Alara looked at the file, at the man standing before her, at the crossroads she'd reached. She could leave. The contract had a minimum term that was almost up. She could walk away, take the settlement money, go back to her life. Or she could stay. She could choose to believe that people could change, that love could heal instead of hurt. It was the hardest decision she'd ever had to make. And she made it. She picked up the file and walked to the kitchen sink. Adrian watched, confusion crossing his face as she turned on the gas stove. What are you doing? Alara held the document over the flame. The corner caught, orange fire eating through the paper, turning his panic and her potential prison into ash. Making a choice, she said. The file burned in the sink, smoke curling up toward the ceiling. Adrian stared at the flames like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. You're staying. His voice was barely above a whisper. I'm staying, but we need new rules. Okay. No more secrets, no more drafting contracts behind my back. Even if you're scared, we talk about everything, even the ugly stuff. Agreed. And you need to cut your father out of your life, completely. He's toxic, Adrian. He's going to keep doing this until one of us breaks. Adrian's jaw tightened. He's still my father. He's a manipulator who's trying to destroy the first real thing you've had in years. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to hurt you. She watched him struggle with it, years of conditioning warring with what he knew was true. Finally, he nodded. You're right. I'll handle it. We'll handle it, together. He crossed the space between them then, pulling her into his arms. She felt him shaking. I thought I'd lost you, he said into her hair. You almost did. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She pulled back to look at him. Stop apologizing and start proving it. How? By being honest. By letting me in. By trusting that I'm not going to disappear the moment things get hard. Things are already hard. Then it's a good thing I'm stubborn. He almost smiled. Then his expression turned serious. There's something else you should know. About my father. What? He didn't just break into my safe. He's been having you followed. Her blood went cold. What? I found out this morning. Private investigator. He's been documenting everywhere you go, everyone you talk to, building a file to use against you if he needs to. That's insane. That's James Voss. He doesn't fight fair. He finds your weakness and he exploits it until you break. What's my weakness supposed to be? Your family. Liam, specifically. Adrian's expression darkened. He knows about the treatment, about how fragile Liam's recovery is. He's threatened to... He stopped, his jaw clenching. To what? To pull funding for Liam's ongoing care if you don't leave me. The room tilted. Alara grabbed the counter to steady herself. He can't do that. The money's already been paid. For the initial treatment, yes, but there's follow-up care. Years of it. Monitoring, medication, checkups. All expensive. All necessary to keep him in remission. Adrian looked physically ill. He's offering to cover all of it. Put it in a trust. Guarantee Liam's health for the rest of his life. All you have to do is divorce me and disappear. And if I don't? Then he makes sure your family loses everything again. The business your father was trying to rebuild. Your mother's job. He has connections there. He'll systematically destroy them until you have no choice. Alara felt like she couldn't breathe. When did you find this out? This morning, right before I came home and found you with that file. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I was trying to figure out how to fix it first. Because I didn't want you to have to make this choice. What choice? There is no choice. I can't let him hurt my family. No. Adrian's voice was firm. You're not leaving. Adrian, I won't let him do this. I won't let him use your family as leverage. How are you going to stop him? He's your father. He controls half the business world. Then I'll burn it all down if I have to. The intensity in his eyes was almost frightening. I will not lose you because of him. I won't. You're talking about destroying your own company. I'm talking about choosing what matters. He cupped her face in his hands. You matter. More than the business, more than my father's approval, more than any of it. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. She wanted to believe him, but the weight of her family's safety was crushing. I need to think, she said. Alara, please, I just need time to think. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. Okay, take whatever time you need. She went to her room and closed the door, then sat on the bed with her phone in her hands. She should call her mother, warn her. But what would she even say? That the man who'd saved Liam's life was now threatening to destroy them unless she walked away from his son. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Mrs. Voss, we haven't formally met. James Voss. Her hand tightened on the phone. I have nothing to say to you. I think you do. I think you have a very important decision to make. If you think threatening my family will make me leave Adrian, you're wrong. Am I? I have the paperwork ready. One signature from you and Liam's future is secure. Your parents' debts cleared again. Your mother keeps her job. Your father's business gets the investors it needs, all of it guaranteed, legal, binding. And all I have to do is destroy your son. Adrian will survive, he always does, but your brother? James's voice turned cold. How long do you think he'll last without proper care? How long before the cancer comes back and you're watching him die, knowing you could have prevented it? Tears burned her eyes. You're a monster. I'm a realist. You're a sweet girl, Alara. You don't belong in our world. Go back to your life. Let Adrian go back to his. Everyone wins. Except Adrian. Adrian will thank me eventually, once he realizes you were just a distraction from what really matters. And what's that? Legacy, power, building something that lasts. Love is temporary. Empire is forever. You're wrong. We'll see. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, I start making calls. He paused. Choose wisely, my dear. Your brother's life depends on it. The line went dead. Alara sat there shaking, the phone clutched in her hand. She'd known James was ruthless, but this was something else. This was calculated cruelty designed to hit her where it would hurt most. There was a soft knock on her door. Can I come in? Adrian's voice. Yes. He entered, took one look at her face, and crossed the room immediately. What happened? Your father called? Adrian's expression went dark. What did he say? She told him everything. By the time she finished, Adrian looked ready to put his fist through a wall. He gave me 24 hours, she said quietly. You're not leaving. Adrian, it's Liam's life. And it's your life too. I won't let you sacrifice yourself again. You've already given up enough. But if something happens to him, it won't. Adrian pulled out his phone, dialing rapidly. Marcus, I need you to draft something immediately. A trust for Liam Quinn. Full medical coverage for life, guaranteed. I don't care what it costs. Have it ready by tomorrow morning. He paused. Yes, I'm sure. Just do it. He hung up and turned back to her. Done. Liam's care is covered, no strings attached. My father has no leverage. Adrian, that's too much. It's not enough. It will never be enough to make up for what he's putting you through. He sat beside her, taking her hands. I'm not going to let him win. Not this time. He's your father. He'll always be part of your life. Not anymore. Tomorrow I'm filing a restraining order. I'm removing him from the company board. I'm cutting every single tie that binds us together. You'll lose everything you've built. I'll lose you if I don't. That's not a trade I'm willing to make. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Found nothing but certainty. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for me? Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. You love me? Her voice broke. I think I've loved you since you bandaged my hand and told me decent people sacrifice for the people they care about. Maybe before that. I don't know. I just know that the thought of losing you is worse than anything my father could do to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You're an idiot. I know. You should be protecting yourself, not me. Can't do both. I choose you. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. He kissed her back like she was oxygen, and he was drowning. When they broke apart, she whispered, I love you too. Even though you're terrible at expressing emotions and you work too much and you're way too controlling. Those are all valid criticisms. I'm not done. You're also brave and kind when you think no one's looking, and you remember things about me that I don't even remember telling you, and you buy me white roses for no reason. There's always a reason. What's the reason? Because you deserve beautiful things. Because I want you to know I'm thinking about you. Because I'm terrible with words, but I can at least buy flowers. She laughed through her tears. You're better with words than you think. Only with you. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other, and Alara felt something settle in her chest. They were going to fight. They were going to face James together. And whatever happened, they'd handle it. But she'd underestimated just how far James was willing to go. The next morning, Adrian left early to meet with his lawyers. Alara was in the kitchen making coffee when her phone rang. Her mother, crying. Mom, what's wrong? It's Liam. He collapsed at school. We're at the hospital. They're running tests. Her voice broke. They think the cancer might be back. Everything stopped. The world narrowed to those words. The cancer might be back. I'm coming. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She grabbed her purse and ran for the elevator, called Adrian on the way down. Alara, is everything? It's Liam. Hospital. I have to go. I'm coming with you. You're meeting with the lawyers. They can wait. Tell me which hospital. She did. By the time her car arrived, Adrian was calling back. I'll meet you there. Drive safe. The hospital was exactly as she remembered it, sterile and terrifying and smelling like fear. Her mother was in the waiting room, her father beside her, looking 20 years older than he had a month ago. Where is he? Alara asked. They took him for scans. They won't tell us anything yet. Her mother grabbed her hands. What if it's back? What if the treatment didn't work? We don't know anything yet. Let's not panic until we have answers. But she was panicking. She was absolutely panicking. Adrian arrived 15 minutes later, still in his suit from the meeting he'd abandoned. He pulled Alara aside. Have they said anything? Not yet. They're running tests. What can I do? Nothing. Just stay. I'm not going anywhere. They waited. An hour. 2. The not knowing was worse than anything. Finally, a doctor emerged. Quinn family? They all stood. Liam's awake. The scans are clear. No signs of cancer recurrence. What we're seeing is a severe anxiety attack combined with exhaustion. He's been under significant stress and his body essentially shut down. Relief crashed through Alara so hard she almost fell. Adrian caught her. He's okay? Her mother asked, sobbing. He's okay. We're keeping him overnight for observation, but he should be fine to go home tomorrow. After the doctor left, Alara's mother turned to her. Stress? What stress? We've tried to keep everything normal for him. Alara and Adrian exchanged glances. Can we see him? Alara asked. Room 304. Liam looked small in the hospital bed, pale but awake. He smiled weakly when they walked in. Hey, sis. You scared the hell out of us. She sat beside him, taking his hand. Sorry, I didn't mean to. What happened? He looked uncomfortable. Nothing. Liam. I've been worried, okay? About the money, about you. What do you mean? I heard Mom and Dad talking about how much the treatment cost, about how we'd never be able to pay it back, and then some guy approached me at school last week. Ice flooded Alara's veins. What guy? He said he was a friend of yours, said he wanted to make sure I was doing okay. Asked a lot of questions about you and him. Liam gestured at Adrian. What did he look like? Adrian's voice was tight. Old, maybe 50, expensive suit. He gave me his card, said to call if I ever needed anything. Do you still have it? Liam pulled it from his wallet. Adrian looked at it and his jaw clenched. James Voss. Personal number. He's been getting to your brother, Adrian said quietly. Planting seeds. Making him worry. Why would he do that? Liam asked. Because he's trying to break us apart, Alara said. And he's using you to do it. Understanding dawned on Liam's face. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's not your fault. She squeezed his hand. None of this is your fault. But as they left the hospital later, Alara felt something harden in her chest. James had crossed a line. He'd gone after a 13-year-old kid, her kid brother. That was unforgivable. I'm going to kill him, she said in the car. Adrian glanced at her. Get in line. I'm serious, he approached Liam. He stressed him out so badly he ended up in the hospital. I know, and he's going to pay for it. How? Adrian's smile was cold. I've been playing nice because he's my father, but that's done. If he wants a war, I'll give him a war. The next day, Adrian moved forward with everything. The restraining order, the removal from the board, the public statement announcing he was severing all business and personal ties with his father. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Half the board sided with James. Stock prices dropped. Business partners started asking questions. Adrian's phone rang constantly with people wanting explanations, wanting him to reconsider. He ignored all of it. Are you sure about this? Alara asked one night, watching him field yet another angry call. Absolutely. You're losing everything. I'm losing dead weight. There's a difference. But she could see the toll it was taking. The stress carved into his face, the exhaustion in his eyes. 2 weeks later, James fired his final shot. A press conference. Cameras everywhere. James standing at a podium looking every inch the wronged father. It's with deep sadness that I address my son's recent actions, he began. Adrian has always been troubled, emotional. After the death of his fiancée years ago, he never fully recovered. I'd hoped marriage would stabilize him, but I've recently learned the truth about his current relationship. Alara watched from Adrian's office, her stomach sinking. Adrian's marriage to Alara Quinn is a sham, a contract marriage designed to close a business deal. I have documents proving the arrangement, proving that this young woman was paid to marry my son. The whole thing is a fraud designed to deceive business partners and the public. He held up papers. The contract. Their contract. How did he get that? Alara whispered. Adrian's face was white. I don't know. I'm calling for a full investigation into Adrian's business practices, into his mental fitness to run Voss Industries, and I'm asking his so-called wife to do the right thing, tell the truth, stop enabling his delusions, set him free to get the help he needs. The press erupted with questions. Adrian's phone exploded with calls. Alara felt the world tilting. He's destroying you, she said. He's trying. Adrian, this is too much. Maybe we should... Don't, he turned to her. Don't even think about leaving. But he's right. The contract was real. We can't deny it. So what? It was real, and then it became something else. That's not fraud, that's life. The board won't see it that way. I don't care what the board thinks. You should. This is your company. It's just a company, Alara. You're my life. The words should have made her feel better. Instead, they made everything worse, because she could see what this was costing him. His reputation, his business, everything he'd built, all because of her. That night, she made a decision. She waited until Adrian fell asleep. Then she packed a bag, wrote a letter, left it on the kitchen counter beside her wedding ring, and she walked out. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder than signing the contract, harder than anything. But she loved him too much to watch him destroy himself for her. So she left. She went to her parents' house, ignoring their questions, and locked herself in her old bedroom. Her phone rang constantly. Adrian, over and over. She didn't answer. At midnight, there was pounding on the front door. Her father answered it. She heard raised voices, then footsteps on the stairs. Her door flew open. Adrian stood there, still in the clothes he'd slept in, his hair a mess, her letter crumpled in his hand. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Adrian, I'm leaving because I love you? That's the biggest load of crap I've ever read. It's true. You're losing everything because of me. I don't care." "Well, I care. I care that your father is destroying you. I care that your business is falling apart. I care that none of that matters without you." The words echoed in the small room. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "I mean it more than I've ever meant anything." He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "I would burn it all down. The company, the money, everything, if it meant keeping you. Don't you understand that? You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly. For the first time in years, I'm thinking clearly." He cupped her face. "I love you. Not the business, not my reputation, not any of it. You. Just you. But your father will lose. Because I'm not backing down. Because I'm not giving you up. Because I finally found something worth fighting for, and I'll be damned if I let him take it away." Tears streamed down her face. "I was trying to protect you. I don't need protection. I need you, here, with me, fighting beside me, not running away to save me from myself." "I'm scared." "Me too, but we're scared together. That's the deal." She looked at this man who'd started as a stranger, become a contract, and somehow transformed into everything that mattered. "I left my ring," she said. He pulled it from his pocket. "I brought it with me." That was presumptuous. "I'm a presumptuous person." "You're an idiot. We've established that." He slid the ring back on her finger, and it felt different this time, not like a shackle, like a promise. "Take me home," she whispered. "Already there." He kissed her, and she kissed him back, and when they broke apart, she saw her parents watching from the doorway. "Well," her mother said, "I guess that answers that question." "What question?" Elara asked. "Whether this marriage was real or not." She smiled. "It's real." Later, back at the penthouse, they lay tangled together in bed. "We're really doing this?" Elara asked. "Looks like it. Your father's going to keep fighting. Let him. We might lose everything. We'll rebuild. You're very confident for someone whose life is falling apart." He turned to face her. "My life was falling apart before you. You're the thing holding it together. That's a lot of pressure. You can handle it. How do you know? Because you've handled everything else. My coldness, my father, my baggage. You're the strongest person I know. I ran away tonight, and you came back. That's what matters." She curled against him. "What happens now?" "Now we fight, together, and we win." "You make it sound simple." "It's not, but it's worth it." She kissed his shoulder. "I love you. I love you too." And for the first time since this whole thing began, Elara believed they might actually make it. The war with James Voss didn't end cleanly. Real wars never did. The morning after Adrian brought her home, they woke to find the story plastered across every business publication and gossip site. Contract marriage exposed. Billionaire's sham wedding. The headlines were brutal, and the speculation was worse. Elara sat at the kitchen table scrolling through her phone, her coffee growing cold beside her. "Stop reading that garbage," Adrian said, taking the phone from her hands. "People are saying terrible things about you." "People have always said terrible things about me. I stopped caring what they thought years ago." "But this is different. They're calling you unstable, saying you're not fit to run the company." "Let them say it." He poured himself coffee, his movements calm despite the chaos erupting around them. "Words don't change reality. Your board is meeting today to discuss your removal. I know. And you're just, what? Accepting it?" He turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "I'm choosing my battles. The board can do whatever they want. I own 40% of the company outright. They can't force me out completely. But your father controls 30% through various holdings, which means we're at a stalemate unless the other shareholders pick a side." Adrian sipped his coffee. "And that's where things get interesting." "How is any of this interesting?" "Because my father's been so busy destroying me that he forgot to watch his own back. Marcus has been quietly reaching out to the other major shareholders. Turns out, a lot of them don't appreciate James's scorched earth approach to family disputes." What are you saying? I'm saying we might have more support than he thinks. Before Alara could respond, Adrian's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted. It's Richard Patterson, one of the major shareholders, he answered. Richard. Yes, I saw the news. I understand. A pause. Today? That's earlier than expected. Yes, I'll be there. Thank you. He hung up and something like satisfaction crossed his face. The board meeting's been moved up to noon, emergency session. That's in 3 hours. I know. He looked at her. I want you to come with me. What? Adrian, no. That's your business world. I don't belong. You belong wherever I am, and I need you there. Why? Because they're going to try to tear me apart, and I need to remember why I'm fighting. I need you there to remind me. She searched his face, saw the vulnerability underneath the determination. This wasn't just about business. This was about him standing up to his father in front of everyone who mattered in their world. Okay, she said quietly. I'll come. The Voss Industries building was all glass and steel, reaching toward the sky like a monument to ambition. Alara had been there once before, briefly, when Adrian had shown her his office. But that had been different, quiet, after hours. Just the two of them. This was different. The lobby was full of people, reporters shouting questions as they pushed through. Adrian kept his hand on her back, steady and protective, as they made their way to the elevators. Mr. Voss, is it true your marriage is a fraud? Alara, did you marry him for money? Is it true you're being removed as CEO? Adrian ignored all of it. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the noise, and Alara could breathe again. You okay? He asked. No, but I'm here. That's all I need. The boardroom was on the 45th floor. Patricia was waiting outside, her expression grim. They're already inside. Your father arrived an hour ago with his lawyers. Of course he did. Adrian straightened his tie. How many board members are here? All of them. This is serious, Adrian. They have the votes to remove you. We'll see about that. He reached for the door handle, but Alara caught his arm. Adrian, wait. He turned. Whatever happens in there, I'm proud of you, for standing up to him, for choosing yourself instead of just doing what's expected. Something softened in his expression. He kissed her forehead. Thank you. Then he opened the door. The boardroom was exactly what she'd expected. Massive table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city. 12 board members sat around the table, their expressions ranging from sympathetic to hostile. And at the head of the table, looking perfectly comfortable in what should have been Adrian's chair, sat James Voss. Adrian, James said smoothly, and you brought your wife. How inappropriate. She stays, Adrian said, his voice leaving no room for argument. This is a private board meeting. She stays, or I leave. Your choice. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Richard Patterson spoke. Let her stay. We have more important things to discuss than who's in the room. James's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Alara sat in a chair against the wall while Adrian took a seat at the table, notably not at the head, a small victory for his father. Let's get to it, James said. We're here to discuss my son's fitness to lead this company. Recent revelations about his personal life have raised serious questions about his judgment and stability. You mean the revelations you leaked to the press? Adrian said calmly. I did what was necessary to protect this company. By exposing private contracts? By sicking investigators on my wife? By approaching her 13-year-old brother? Adrian's voice was sharp. Tell me, Father, which part of that was protecting the company? Murmurs around the table. Several board members looked uncomfortable. Your marriage is a sham, James continued, ignoring the accusation. You paid this woman to marry you to close a business deal. That's fraud. It's not fraud. The marriage is legal. The merger went through on legitimate grounds. What happened in my personal life is exactly that, personal. Is it personal when it affects shareholder confidence? James leaned forward. Stock prices have dropped 15% since this news broke. We've lost 3 major accounts. Investors are asking questions. This isn't personal, Adrian. This is business. Stock prices will recover. They always do. And any investor who's seriously concerned about my marriage instead of our quarterly earnings isn't someone we want as a partner anyway. That's your professional opinion, that we should alienate investors? My professional opinion is that this company has posted record profits for 6 consecutive quarters under my leadership. My personal life has never interfered with my business acumen, and it won't start now. James smiled, cold and calculating. Even when your personal life involves falling for the woman you hired to play your wife? Even when you're making emotional decisions instead of strategic ones? I'm making the decision to remove you from this board. That's strategic enough for me. The room went silent. You can't do that, James said, his voice dangerous. Actually, I can. According to our bylaws, the CEO has the authority to remove board members who act against the company's interests. You've been leaking confidential information to the press. You've been using company resources to investigate employees and their families. You've been actively sabotaging business relationships. That's more than enough grounds for removal. James stood abruptly. This is mutiny. This is business. Something you taught me, remember? Adrian stood as well, meeting his father's gaze without flinching. You told me emotions were weakness, that caring was liability. That power was all that mattered. Well, congratulations. You created exactly the kind of son who would cut you out without hesitation. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was listening to you for as long as I did. The tension in the room was suffocating. Ilara watched the two men face each other across the table, son and father, locked in a battle that had been building for decades. Finally, Richard Patterson cleared his throat. I think we need to vote on both matters, Adrian's removal as CEO and James's removal from the board. Agreed, said another board member. They voted on Adrian first. Ilara held her breath as hands went up around the table. 7-5. In favor of keeping Adrian as CEO. She almost sobbed with relief. Then they voted on James. 9-3. He was out. James's face went white with fury. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Adrian's voice was final. Security will escort you from the building. Don't come back. For a moment, Ilara thought James might actually attack his own son. The rage radiating from him was palpable. But then he seemed to master himself, pulling on the cold control that had defined him for so long. You'll regret this, he said quietly. Both of you. I doubt it, Adrian replied. James looked at Ilara then, and the hatred in his eyes made her skin crawl. I warned you, he said. I told you he'd destroy you. Just wait, you'll see. Then he walked out, and the room seemed to breathe again. The board members filed out one by one, some offering congratulations, others just looking relieved it was over. Richard was the last to leave. That took courage, he told Adrian. Your father's had this company by the throat for years. It's about time someone stood up to him. After he left, it was just Adrian and Ilara in the massive boardroom. We won, she said, still not quite believing it. We survived. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, exhaustion finally showing on his face. That's not quite the same thing. But you did it. You actually cut him out. I should have done it years ago. He crossed to where she sat, pulling her to her feet. Thank you for being here. I didn't do anything. You were here. That was everything. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling him shaking slightly. The adrenaline wearing off, reality setting in. What now? She asked. Now we go home. We figure out what comes next, together. But before they could leave, Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. News is already spreading. Your father's given an interview. You need to see this. Adrian pulled up the video. James, looking composed and sympathetic, speaking to a reporter. I'm disappointed, of course. Adrian's always been volatile, but I'd hoped marriage would stabilize him. Instead, it seems to have pushed him over the edge. I genuinely worry for his mental health and for that poor girl he's trapped in this situation. Unbelievable, Ilara breathed. He's playing the concerned father card. Classic. Adrian shut off the video. He's going to keep doing this, attacking from the outside since he can't attack from within. So what do we do? Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, we tell the truth, all of it. What do you mean? I mean we stop hiding. We stop letting him control the narrative. We give an interview, a real one. We tell them about the contract, about what happened after, about us, the whole story. Adrian, that's so public. Everyone will know everything. They already think they know everything. At least this way they'll know the truth. Are you sure? He cupped her face in his hands. I'm tired of living in the shadows. Tired of pretending. I want the world to know that yes, our marriage started as a contract, but it became something real, something worth fighting for. Is that okay with you? She thought about it, about her privacy, about her family seeing all of this, about the judgment they'd face. But then she thought about Adrian, about the courage it took for him to stand up to his father, about the fact that he was willing to risk everything for them. Okay, she said. Let's do it. The interview was set up for the following week, a major news magazine, primetime slot. Patricia worked with their PR team to prep them, but Adrian had been clear. No scripts, no carefully crafted answers. Just honesty. The night before the interview, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Adrian read beside her. What if this makes everything worse? She asked. It might. That's not reassuring. He set down his book. You want me to lie and say it'll all be fine? Yes, actually. He smiled. Sorry, not my style. Then he grew serious. But I will say this. Whatever happens, we'll handle it. We've survived this long. We can survive whatever comes next. You sound very confident. I'm faking it. She laughed despite herself. At least you're honest. Always. With you, anyway. The interview took place in their penthouse. The reporter, a woman named Sarah Chen, arrived with a camera crew and kind eyes. Thank you for doing this, she said as they set up. I know it's not easy. Nothing about this has been easy, Adrian replied, but it's necessary. They sat on the couch, close enough to touch, but not quite touching. Professional, but intimate. The cameras started rolling. Let's start with the obvious question, Sarah began. Is it true your marriage began as a contractual arrangement? Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. Can you explain the circumstances? I needed a wife to close a business deal. Alara needed money for her brother's medical treatment. We signed a contract that was meant to last 1 year, then end in quiet divorce. And now? Adrian glanced at Alara. She nodded slightly. Now I can't imagine my life without her. Sarah turned to Alara. Is that true? Do you feel the same way? Alara took a breath. When I signed that contract, I thought I was making a sacrifice, trading my freedom for my brother's life. But it turns out I wasn't losing anything. I was finding everything I didn't know I needed. Oh, that sounds very romantic. But your critics would say you're just continuing the performance. How do you respond to that? Let them think what they want, Alara said. I know what's real. The interview continued for an hour. They talked about everything. How they'd met, the early days of cold distance, the slow thaw, the moment things changed. Adrian talked about Catherine for the first time publicly, about the grief that had shaped him, about learning to open himself to love again. Alara talked about feeling invisible her whole life and finally being seen. It was raw and honest and sometimes painful, but it was real. At the end, Sarah asked one final question. Your father has been very vocal about his disapproval of this relationship. What would you say to him if he was watching? Adrian was quiet for a moment, then, I'd say thank you for showing me exactly the kind of man I don't want to be, for teaching me that power without love is just loneliness in an expensive suit, and for pushing so hard against us that I finally found the courage to stand up to you. And you, Alara. Anything you'd like to say to James Voss? She looked directly at the camera. You underestimated me. You thought I was weak because I was kind. You thought I'd run because I was scared. But I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. When the interview aired 3 days later, the response was overwhelming. Social media exploded. Half the people loved them, calling their story romantic and brave. The other half called it a publicity stunt, said they were still lying. But the stock prices stabilized. The major shareholders issued statements of support, and slowly the narrative started to shift. 2 weeks after the interview, Alara was at the grocery store when someone approached her. You're that woman from the interview. Alara tensed, expecting hostility. Yes, I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter's been in an arranged marriage situation. Family pressure, you know. Seeing you stand up for yourself gave her the courage to walk away. So thank you. After the woman left, Alara stood in the produce section trying not to cry. That night, she told Adrian about it. See, he said, pulling her close. We did the right thing. Some people still think we're liars. Some people will always think the worst. But some people were helped by our story. That's enough. Things settled into a new normal over the following weeks. The media attention gradually faded. The company stabilized. James disappeared from public view, though Adrian's lawyers reported he was still trying to find ways to undermine them. But his attempts grew weaker, more desperate. Without his board position, without Adrian's compliance, he had no real power over them anymore. One evening, 6 weeks after the interview, Alara was cooking dinner when Adrian came home early. She turned from the stove to find him holding a folder. What's that? New contract. Her stomach dropped. Adrian, not that kind of contract. Just read it. She wiped her hands and took the folder. Inside was a single page. Simple, straightforward language. It was a dissolution of their original marriage contract. A legal document declaring the previous agreement null and void, with no penalties, no obligations. What is this? She whispered. Freedom, if you want it. Adrian's voice was carefully neutral. Our year is almost up. I wanted you to know that you can walk away. No strings attached. Everything I promised you, the money, the medical care for Liam, all of it, is yours regardless. No conditions. She looked up at him. You're giving me an out. I'm giving you a choice, a real one this time. And if I choose to stay, then we tear up this document and we do this for real. No contract, no timeline, just marriage. Actual marriage. Her hands trembled on the paper. You want to really marry me? We're already really married. I just want to make sure you're staying because you want to, not because you think you have to. She set the folder down and crossed to him, taking his face in her hands. I'm staying because I love you. Because waking up next to you is the best part of my day. Because you remember how I like my coffee, and you buy me flowers for no reason, and you're terrible at expressing emotions, but you try anyway. Those are all good reasons. I'm staying because you're mine, and I'm yours, and that's how I want it. Relief flooded his expression. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and when they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said. Not because you saved me or fixed me or any of that romantic nonsense. I love you because you're annoying and stubborn and you leave lights on everywhere and you refuse to give up on people even when they give you every reason to. That's possibly the worst declaration of love I've ever heard. Want me to try again? No, it's perfect. He picked her up, making her shriek with laughter, and carried her to their bedroom. The dinner burned on the stove, forgotten, as they finally crossed the last line they'd been afraid to cross. Afterward, tangled together in sheets, Alara traced patterns on his chest. We should probably do something about that contract, she said. Already handled. Adrian nodded toward the fireplace, where the folder sat in the flames, burning to ash. When did you do that? While you were getting ready for bed. Presumptuous. I prefer optimistic. She laughed and kissed his shoulder. What now? Now we live. We build something real. We stop surviving and start actually existing. That simple? That complicated, but we'll figure it out. 6 months later, they stood in a small chapel surrounded by family and friends. Liam, healthy and growing taller every day, stood as Adrian's best man. Alara's mother cried through the entire ceremony, and when the officiant asked if they took each other as husband and wife, they both said yes without hesitation. This time, when Adrian kissed her, it wasn't a transaction or a performance. It was a promise, a choice they were both making freely. The reception was small, intimate. No business associates, no social obligations, just people they actually cared about. Happy? Adrian asked, pulling her onto the dance floor. Deliriously. Good. That's the plan for the rest of our lives. Delirious happiness? That and white roses. Lots of white roses. She laughed against his chest. I love you. I love you too. They danced until the music faded, until the guests left, until it was just the two of them in the empty hall. Ready to go home? Adrian asked. I'm already home, she said. I have been since the day you finally let me in. He kissed her forehead. Best decision I ever made. Signing the contract? Tearing it up. They left the chapel hand in hand, stepping out into the cool evening air. The city stretched before them, full of possibility, full of life. Somewhere out there, James Voss was probably plotting his next move. Somewhere, critics were still questioning their story. Somewhere, people were doubting them. But none of that mattered, because they had each other. They had love that was tested and proven. They had a future they were building together, one day at a time. Adrian had spent years believing he was incapable of love. Alara had spent years believing she was invisible. They'd both been wrong. And in finding each other, first through necessity, then through choice, they'd found themselves. The penthouse was different when they returned from their honeymoon. Not in any physical way, but in the way it felt. It wasn't a museum anymore. It was full of life, full of light. Photos on the walls now. Their wedding, Liam's recovery celebration, Adrian and Alara on a beach somewhere. Her books scattered on tables. His reading glasses left on the counter. Evidence of two lives thoroughly intertwined. Alara stood by the windows one evening, watching the sunset paint the city gold. Adrian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is. How different I am." "Better different?" "Yes, definitely better." "Any regrets?" "Just one." He tensed. "What?" "I wish I'd been brave enough to fall for you sooner. We wasted a lot of time being scared." He relaxed, kissing the side of her neck. "We had to be scared first. Otherwise, we wouldn't appreciate this." Very philosophical for a ruthless businessman. "I'm a reformed, ruthless businessman. There's a difference." She turned in his arms. "You know what I want?" "What?" "To start that foundation, the one we talked about, for families dealing with medical debt." "We can do that." "Really?" "Really. We'll call it the Catherine Quinn Foundation. Honor both the past and the present." Tears pricked her eyes. "That's perfect." "You're perfect." "I'm really not." "To me, you are." They stood there as the sun set completely, as the city lights came on one by one, as the world continued spinning around them. And for the first time in either of their lives, they weren't just surviving. They were living, really, truly living, together.